today we are talking about peace. So for peace, empower women. And I am your host. My name is Faye. I am the founder of One January. So we make ethical activewear from recycled plastic. And our promise to our customers is that we will donate $1 for every dollar that we make to empower women impacted by war and poverty. And giving them leadership and sports opportunities. So that's where the money goes. As to our nonprofit partner, She Can Try, which has worked with women in both Afghanistan and in Kenya. So you might be wondering, why am I so passionate about women in leadership? And will it really make the world more peaceful, to have these women? So here to talk about all of this, we have an incredible panel. So let me break it down to you. So we have Clare Hutchinson, who is the former special representative for women, peace, and security at NATO. We have Zeinab Rezaie, who's the first Afghan woman to ever finish an IRONMAN event. I got to be there as she carried the flag across the finish line at the Ironman 70.3 in Dubai in February of 2020. We have Susan Sloan, who is the author of A Seat at the Table, Women, Diplomacy, and Lessons for the World, an incredible book that I read while I was deployed to Afghanistan myself, with my highlighter in hand. If you haven't read it, I'd highly suggest it. And we have Golda Velez, who is the co-founder of RaiseTheVoices. All right, so let's kick it off. So I want to start with Clare. And Clare, we kind of have similar paths. You started out, as a journalist, and then you ended up at NATO. Can you talk to me? When did you make that transition? When did you start advocating for women, and why?
Great, thanks, Jackie, and hello, everyone. And I was just thinking as you were speaking, it should be an iron person competition. And we should advocate for that change. And thank you for the invitation. It's lovely to be here. I think I have always been a feminist as a child, and I've also been a protester. If there was something to protest, I was there. But the recognition that women and how women are treated, and they're treated differently, was something that hit me as I grew up. And it actually started with a bike for Christmas, where I wanted the same as the boys, which was a chopper bike, a big bike with big handles and a big seat that was robust over, terrain. And I got a pink shopper bike. And when I asked, I don't want this, I want that bike, I was told that's a girl's bike. And I realized, oh, there's a difference here. So, I'm being sort of facetious a little bit, but I've always recognized the differences. And when I actually worked as in the media, I was working as a reporter, and I came across in the early 90s during the Bosnian conflict, a group of women who were talking about the different things that were happening in the Balkans. And I had never recognized internationally what women went through, because I came from a very privileged background in that I was, in a safe zone and with a loving family, even though they bought me the wrong bike. And I then became very mobilized, and I worked in technology early on, starting programs online very way back at the internet started, called AthenaNet, trying to connect women online who were in rural communities and training women how to use the internet, very burgeoning internet and the computer. And then I ended up going back to university and looking at a focus on feminism, international relations. And then that was it. That was my mobilization into the world of international relations. Worked for the UN as a gender advisor for 15 years, and then got asked to go to NATO as the special representative. So it's been in me always, but I'm just happy that I'm able to use both my passion and my interest to work on women, peace and security, and women's equality and empowerment.
Yeah, we're so lucky to have women like you in the world working at a high scale. I've, of course, worked often with the military and NATO troops from all different countries in my work in Afghanistan, and then also here in the Netherlands. And yeah, I see, lots of problems, firsthand that, we have. And then personally at NATO, including women in the military, and then also in the countries, that we also try to help. So we're very lucky to have you. Thank you for that important work. Let's get over to Susan, because she basically interviewed dozens of women diplomats from all different countries. Tell us about, what you did in the research for your book.
Jackie, thank you for having me, and it's an honor to be with all these wonderful women on the panel today. I wrote a book called A Seat at the Table, Women, Diplomacy, and Lessons for the World. I interviewed more than 30 women leaders, from ambassadors, foreign ministers, government officials from around the globe, each with different stories, different leadership paths, and also did research about why gender parity, equity, and equality creates better solutions for the world. And I'm sure all of us on today already know that, yes, of course it creates better solutions for the world. However, what I found it's the personal stories, in addition to statistics and research, that really makes the case. And understanding how in conflict and in challenges and in peace building, we need to have gender and diversity at the table. Otherwise, populations aren't represented and aren't included in that process, and peace won't sustain. And it was a whole journey writing the book. I wrote it in 8 months, and Jackie read it, which I love and I appreciate, and I hope all of you get a chance to read it too. And now I'm on a journey of talking to more women about how we create equity, parity, and equality, and how we can do that before conflict arises.
Yeah. So, the women that you spoke to were working probably, on helping other women and, countries and on all sorts of different issues. But when you were talking to these women, did they have, they were also leaders, and probably, few of the women that had reached to those heights. Was there what had encouraged all of those women in their own lives? Was there a reoccurring theme that you saw?
All of them had a different reason. When I spoke with the ambassador from Namibia, who was the first woman ambassador posted to the United States, her reasoning was that she helped create and build her nation. And she wanted to not only have a seat at the table, but represent other women in the country who previously didn't have a voice under the former regime. When I spoke with the ambassador of Sweden, who was posted to Washington, D.C., she said, it's not a big deal that I'm a woman. Many women are in government in Sweden. And so it's a very different story. However, the story that she told was that it's important now for their country that they had this equity between men and women, especially with parents and family leave. And she described that they're creating a society where if a man doesn't take family leave when they have children or family in need that needs their help, that they're scrutinized. And that's the paradigm that they're shifting right now. And so every country was different. Every woman that I spoke to was very, very different. I spoke to some women from the Middle East and the Gulf, and their experiences were quite different, and more so, how did they raise their voice? How were they seen in the room with other people, and were they given a voice? And how do they maintain their voice when they do have it? And so those are very different conversations. So culturally, regionally, around the globe, the conversation is different for women. However, every single woman I spoke to said, one, I've never been asked this question before, or two, I've never shared this story before. So I knew I was onto something very important. The fact that they share their stories is number one, but two, anytime I get to share their stories, I believe we all become the storyteller. We all become the conduit so other people can learn and grow and generally have a seat at the table.
Yeah. I am always talking to women, and I'm so intrigued by women that reach really high levels. I actually did my, master's thesis at Columbia about women in technology and problems in the pipeline, and, you know, talking to them about work-life balance and all the things that us women get asked, you know, that men don't get asked. But one recurring theme,
that's the truth. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But one recurring theme I did see in my research is a lot of women leaders, no matter what field it was, whether it was politics or technology or business or the military, had a sports background. And Claire, when you even, you know, the first question I asked you, when you said, you know, the bicycle, you know, instantly I think of, you know, sports. And studies have shown overwhelmingly that women actually, and men who participate in sports become leaders later in life. So I deployed to Afghanistan in 2015. And I was, you know, thinking to myself, well, what has made me a strong woman? And hands down, the answer is sports. Here I was surrounded by a culture where by and large, women did not have access to sports. And I'm thinking, gosh, if anyone needs access to sports, it's these women. You know, they need it for mental health reasons, and to have an outlet, you know, outside of their job, or just to have something fun to do. You know, sports are fun, and just having ownership over your body. But I started, you know, racing around the world to launch a nonprofit to help women in Afghanistan have access to sports. And that's when I met our other panelist, Zeinab. So I was attempting to become the first woman in the world to do 6 Ironmans on 6 continents in 1 year. Zeinab, you were also trying a pretty big goal at the time. I'm sure you remember meeting me back in 2018. Do you want to share it with everybody about how we met?
Yeah, so first, thank you so much for having me, and I'm very grateful to be among these powerful panelists, and thank you everyone else for joining us. We met in 2018 when I was training for an ultramarathon race. It was a self-supported multi-stage 250-kilometer ultra race in Gobi Desert. And that was, we met at a military base. You were the volunteer helping us to get inside the military base. And that military base was one of the only safe places that we could go and run and train for our race. We met there, and then you were training for your goal, and we were training for our race. And after that, we become friends.
Yeah. So, you know, a lot of people don't understand even what She Can Try, you know, my nonprofit did, right? So because there's not safe areas to run. So what we would do is we would take athletes like Zeinab to safe areas to run. And one of those areas was the NATO headquarters, which is attached to the US Embassy in Kabul. And, you know, running with Zeinab in 2018, as she was training for this ultra marathon, became part of my training as I was training for my own Ironmans. And actually, so I ended up, you know, going on the Today Show after I accomplished my goal. And I'm walking in Central Park in New York City after I accomplished my goal. And the first person, you know, I messaged about, you know, I was like, I talked to you about you on national television today. And I messaged Zeinab, and, you know, Zeinab at the time didn't even know what the Today Show is. And so I was like, no, it's actually a big deal. And so yeah, it was really incredible. And then after that, you know, I recruited a team of Afghan women to go on to train as their country's first triathletes. And Zeinab was on that team. So not only did Zeinab become, it was the 5th Afghan woman to ever finish an ultra marathon, she later went on to become one of the first triathletes training in her country. Zeinab, do you want to talk about some challenges of training for a triathlon? Now you're in the States, but tell us about how it was when you were training to swim, bike, and run in Kabul.
So I can talk a lot about the challenges we had as women to play a sport in Afghanistan, in a war-torn country, of course. So as we point out earlier, there weren't enough safe places for us to train, either to bike or to run and to swim. So I want to I really like to do a comparison for you coming from a first world country and training in a military camp. It was difficult for you because you have all the beautiful trails, all the beautiful places to run without any problem or harassment. While for us, we were even appreciating that training camp and being able to run in that training in that military camp. So that's one of the comparison, but there were a lot of other challenges. For example, in Kabul with 6 million population, that half of them are women, 3 million, there were only 2 swimming pools for us to train, and the swimming pools were very small and they were very expensive. Like if I wanted to train by myself, I couldn't afford to pay for a swimming pool. So that's one of the challenges. We didn't have our road bicycles until 4 months before the race. So in Afghanistan, there are a lot of sport gears, and I can say many sport gears that are coming to the country, especially like even the running shoes. They are secondhand running shoes or equipment that are coming from other countries to Afghanistan, and Afghans are using them to play a sport. And so these are all the lack of equipment, lack of resources, lack of opportunity problems, but also besides all of this, we had a lot of traditional barriers and problems. People mindset could not accept a woman running on the streets or cycling on the streets or swimming. They couldn't really believe that a woman can do this because I mean, I don't blame Afghans because they have been into war for 40 years, and it's the same for every country. I think if there is a 40-year war in every country, the only thing that people are going to think about is how to survive, how to feed themselves, the very basic things. So that's why they couldn't think about women playing the sports. So the society has given the woman a social role, and that's to be a housewife, to be a mother, to be a good daughter. They weren't expecting, like, it was so strange for their daughters to go out and play sports. Even when I was talking to my dad that I'm playing the sport, I'm running marathon, I'm running ultramarathon, I'm doing triathlons. He had no idea what I'm doing. He didn't know what a marathon is, what an ultramarathon is, what a triathlon is. But I'm still very appreciative that he didn't limit me. He was a little bit more, he's still a typical Afghan dad, but a little bit better than other Afghan men. And he didn't avoid me to do whatever I wanted to do because he trusted me. And I'm happy that I had the agency as an Afghan woman. There aren't a lot of women with the agency. They cannot make decisions for themselves and what they want in their life. It doesn't matter if it's sports, like there are women, if they want to go out to bazaar to buy something for themselves, they need to take decision. They need to ask for permission of the male in their household.
Yeah,
so,
I'm going to interrupt you real quick, Zeinab, just to like reiterate that, I lived out in a hotel in Kabul, and I would often not just talk to women, that were Afghans in my hotel, but even the men. And I would always ask them like about their wives. And many times they were like, oh, my wife doesn't go to the store. And this is, just going to the store. So riding a bicycle, swimming, I mean, that's like way up here, right? That's, if going to the store isn't allowed, riding a bicycle and swimming, I don't think people, realize how against cultural norms that was, and, getting harassed. I mean, I remember, so Zeinab went, me and Zeinab and another athlete, Zara, went to run a marathon in Afghanistan in 2019 in Bamyan, which is actually a very safe province. Well, it was safe at the time. And, I remember walking down the street with you, and well, the police officers were talking in Dari, but I remember saying, oh, what did they just say? And they said something about, well, our clothes are super tight. And I mean, I'm wearing like the baggiest like shirts you can imagine. I'm like, if this is tight, well, you should see what I wear on a regular basis. So, you know, this is just, you know, just to give you an idea of, you know, for people that don't understand what it's like, that's what it's like. And Zeinab, you're missing the best part. So tell us what happened in February of 2020. I think people got really distracted the next month. You know, so what happened in February 2020?
So yeah, with all these challenges, finally we were trained enough, I feel, to finish the race, and we went to Dubai to do the race, and I'm very grateful that I could finish it. It was so difficult, so challenging. And here we have Sarah. I'm so thankful. I still remember that she handed me the Afghan flag, and I passed through the finish line. That was very emotional for me, and I'm looking for the same thing when I'm going to finish the IRONMAN 70.3 World Championship in October.
That's right. Okay, so for you guys that don't know, you know, the rest of Zeinab's story. So in February of 2020, she finished the half Ironman. Simultaneously, she was applying for a scholarship to study in the United States. And, you know, we only trained, she only had 4 athletes ever. Our top 2 athletes went on to earn Fulbright scholarships in the United States. So pretty good odds, you know, out of 4 athletes, 2 went on to go to the United States of America. You know, they were able to say they were their country's first triathletes. And Zara ended up leaving Afghanistan on August 11th. So 4 days before the government fell to the Taliban. And then Zeinab was not so lucky. So her flight to the US was on August 16th. But luckily, you know, working some magic and Zeinab's very persuasive attitude and all the things that she had learned, you know, as being an Afghan woman of never giving up, she made it onto a diplomatic flight. And, you know, I was there when she landed in the US, where she's been ever since August. And now she will go on to be the first Afghan woman to compete in the half Ironman World Championship in October. And we will be supporting her every step of the way. And of course, I'll be there for that too. But it's in Utah for anyone that wants to track that. But as you guys know, Afghanistan fell to the Taliban in August, and things have drastically changed there. The Taliban said that they're not allowing girls over the age of 12 to go to school. They've also said that they want women to wear the full burqa in public. So it really looks like, it's going back to the way things were prior to 2001 when, US troops first landed in the country. But there are, some organizations still working in the country, and there are some educational institutions still up and running in the country. Golda with RaiseTheVoices is still running, a program in the country. Golda, can you tell me what you're working on?
Sure. And it's funny because I'm just a connector to it. Really, Banafsha is running the program, who is in Afghanistan. And the interesting thing of feeling that, oh gosh, now we're out of Afghanistan. It's but with Zoom, we're all connected here. Just as easily as we're connected here, you can talk to the women in Afghanistan. They're still there. And they've been educated, and they're not, it may be the Taliban wants to go to the same thing as 2001, but the women aren't the same as they were in 2001. These women have been educated. They've had opportunities. They're responsible. Some of them went to school in Japan. They've done things. They're not the same people. And these professional women, we really don't want to treat them as so far away. We can just talk to them. So Banafsha, as you know, Jackie, and you supported her, which we very much appreciate, is able to teach women online, and sometimes in a kind of secret little basement. It is dangerous for them, but the woman, Banafsha told me that she appreciated so much when she was able to go to school when, the US came and there was that ability for women to go to school. And that made such a difference for her that she needs to do it for other girls, even though it is a danger. So sometimes she has them come into her home or into a home, and they kind of go down in the basement. They sometimes have done a Zoom class with someone far away. They also just go through their textbooks. She teaches them English. She teaches the older ones chemistry and physics. So they're learning just all kinds of subjects. It's a little bit safer for them when they can do it on Zoom. When they can raise the money to spend the $10 a month to have that connectivity, they can do it from their phones. And so, yeah, she's actually running a whole curriculum. Last I heard, it was for about 37 women in Afghanistan, and there's a big need for that to be larger. And so my main role in that is just connecting to Banafsha and trying to, round up support for her. You supported Jackie. We had one investor I had talked to who happened to be an Afghan guy who had some money, and he gave some support, and we've given some support. So we kind of do it little by little. And I can definitely go on, but let me let you see where you want to do it.
No, I mean, I just don't, it's so sad that they have to do it, underground. I mean, that's the way it was, prior to 2001. I don't know that people realize that, but, women have been sneaking to go to school in Afghanistan for a very long time. Right. And so, and it just, I mean, I was watching the news in Afghanistan, and these girls, that were, they were basically pulled out of their classrooms that are over the age of 12 because the schools had closed and opened and closed and opened. And then they were like, okay, the schools are finally open. And they were so excited. I don't think American students are this happy to go back to school, right? We're like, oh, the summer's over. But, these girls were so happy to be in school. And then, they were told, well, if you're over the age of 12, you have to go home. And the news outlets in Afghanistan interviewed all the girls. And of course, they're crying, they're like, you're messing with my future. And that's exactly, what the Taliban is doing. And so, but there are ways to still support the women there. But, there's so many problems all over the world. And I think, for someone like me or someone in America or in Europe, we're like, well, gosh, what can I do to make a difference? And I think, these problems seem so big. And Susan, from talking to all the women around the world and in all of your research, for someone that is, I guess for, lack of a better word, we're in the Western world, what can women and men do to help these issues?
Well, if we're speaking specifically about Afghanistan right now and education, education is the number one factor that all the women I interviewed spoke about that helped them reach the pinnacle of their leadership and success. And so Golda, when I think about what support, y'all need, in my head, I'm like, okay, is it professors? Is it money? Is it phones for people to log into class? And so literally those things are coming to mind, but education is a universal thing that anyone can carry with them wherever they go and cannot be taken away once they have it, right? And once it's ingrained into their mind. And so I believe that is something, the resilience of the mind is something I learned from all the women I interviewed. And so Golda, I'm so curious what you guys, Jackie, I hope it's okay, I'm asking a question, but what you guys need, is it professors? Is it money? Is it phones? Really, what is it?
It's two things. It is money because we need the money to get the connections. They have the phones, but they have to pay $10. Each woman has to pay $10 a month to have her connection. And the women need jobs. There's a lot of professional women there. They will work for $100 a month to pay their rent. You can just hire them. You don't have to give them money. We can just hire them. You can hire 10 of them. If you can afford to hire one full-time person, you just hire 10 of these women. They're competent. They've already trained. They've worked for NGOs. They can use some of the money to help support, what's happening and also to support themselves. So it is money, but it doesn't have to be a gift.
That makes sense. Well, Golda, I will talk to you offline about that. But Jackie, I think to your question is when you give women an opportunity and when they take it, right? And right now it sounds like there's many women in different countries that not only need the opportunity to survive and thrive, but that people are willing to help them make that connection and do it together.
Yeah. Claire, do you want to also try to answer that, in all your work, what have you told, women, like me to do, I mean, not like me. I went to Afghanistan. Not a lot of women did that, but sort of like me.
Yeah, I think one of the big things, and especially a lot of our younger cohort sort of say is, well, there's two things. One, that we've achieved equality, and which we haven't, and the other one is that a person alone cannot do anything. And I disagree. I think that change comes by one individual making a stance. I mean, there's a lovely quote that I often use, saying you cannot make footsteps in the sand if you're always standing on tiptoes. And I really believe that change comes by being a personal advocate, by even bringing somebody up if they say something sexist or inappropriate, by saying, I don't appreciate that. The change comes by that kind of motion. We have had a lot of change over the last, and I work on women, peace and security, so the last 22 years since the adoption of the UN resolution. And there's been loads of change, but change came because people mobilized each other to make that change. And I think that we have, unfortunately, a lot of resistance now, and we've seen this in sexual and reproductive health, where we're going to have to mobilize again the sisterhood and brotherhood to make change. But everybody can make change. It's just how much you want it to change, the system or the patriarchy or whatever it is that you believe in or believe not in.
Yeah. And I liked how you said brotherhood, because I catch myself doing this a lot. And I'm working on actually changing that in myself. The way I talk is, what can we as women do? But why is all the responsibility, always falling on us? And I remember, early on in my journey, advocating for women, I went into a high school and I hosted an event for in the US for 500 girls. And after the event, I was like, gosh, maybe I should have also invited the boys. And that was, a mistake that I had made. And I think, that men, especially young men, need to be talking about this stuff just as much as we women. And I look at this webinar, we have Drew from Austin. Hello, thanks for joining. And we have Harmon. So I'm glad that, we do have some men here. But we are a women's panel. So, but why should men encourage women? Is it a zero-sum game? Are they giving something up, or is there plenty of pie to go around? Golda, do you want to try to answer that?
Sure. And I would say it's very important for men to help the women, for the obvious reason that the men have the majority of the power and money and resources right now. I mean, that's just a fact in many places in the world. So obviously we need the men because they have those things for various reasons. But also beyond that, it's just in terms of getting the shift of mentality. And I don't want to say this to even though that you guys joined and so that you are like right here at the table. But what I see sometimes, like I work in technology, I work in a very male-dominated field, and what I often see is that some men may be very good intentioned, and they want to make change, and they have a big strategy and a plan for how to make the change, and then they're going to go make the change, and they kind of forget two things, which is one, like obviously you need to bring the woman to the table and talk to them about the change, and the other is that if your change is going to help someone, it needs to help someone right now. You can't have this big strategy that's going to help Afghanistan and maybe we have to lend the IMF money to the Taliban. No, don't do that. You have to be aware of the woman right now. And if you have a big plan that can help all these women, can you help one woman right now with your plan? Can you hire her to help with your plan? Can you involve her in your plan and empower her right now? And I think it's that those individuals are test cases. And sometimes the men may think of this big strategy and they're not thinking of the individuals. And so that would be my thought.
Yeah. I think, personally that, when women, are empowered, well, we make money that can allow men to also take a break, when it comes to household duties and that sort of thing. Zeinab, you mentioned earlier that your father really, had given you the option to even, pursue education and pursue sports. Can you talk to, us about how that empowerment of you enabled you now to also help your family in return, right? Like if your father hadn't done that, who knows, like you would not be studying and looking to make US wages, hopefully in the future, right?
Yeah. So I have seen in my life in Afghanistan that some of my friends or some other girls that they had grudge from their fathers or from their brothers for not letting them to do what they want. Thankfully, I do not have that, and I really appreciate my dad, and I'm grateful to be. If I'm here today, it's because they believed in me and they didn't limit me. They didn't limit me. But also talking about men working with women, I wanted to talk about Afghanistan. When the Taliban came and they imposed like a restriction on women, men couldn't do anything because Taliban could easily target men, and they could just easily kill them, but not women. So women went to the streets and they shout for their rights, for their basic rights. But recently, something very beautiful happened. That it's not beautiful, I mean, but Taliban forced women presenters on TV to cover their faces with masks. And then 2 days later, men presenters, they wanted to advocate for the women presenters, and they also wear masks and say, there is no difference. Why should they cover their face? And also they invited one of the Taliban, leaders, and asked him, you should try it too and see how it feels to cover your face. So I also believe that it's so important men stand by women, but I do not blame all Afghan men because sometimes it's difficult. We really need to know the situation and the context.
And we're here today. That the title of this webinar is called, For Peace, Empower Women. And I think Susan, you might have some insight on this. Do more women at the top, does it actually make the world more peaceful?
It does. In fact, when companies and organizations have women in leadership, they're statistically more profitable, which is good for the bottom line. And two, when women are involved in peace treaties and peacekeeping solutions, peace is more lasting, at least like 15 years or more. So yes, having women there helps. Also, women and men see things differently. We look through different lenses, and we need to have both ways that we see at the table. So many leaders that I spoke with said that they learn from their counterparts who are men, they learn from their counterparts who are women, and they both come up with different solutions. And we need to have both of those coming up with solutions for whatever we're going through, whether it's in a company, in the private sector, whether it's a nonprofit, an NGO, or whether it's a government. And so we have to have all of those working together. And my dog's barking in the background because she agrees, something that I learned from speaking with the deputy chief of mission from Croatia, she told me, Lara Romano, she spent time in Afghanistan, and what she learned is that women's circles are very powerful. And when you get involved with women, they can tell you about the security on the ground. They can tell you if their kids are going to school. They can tell you if they go to the market and they feel safe. The intel that you can get from women is important for the military and for the government. And so all of those working together, when we think about civil society, government, private sector, nonprofit sector, diplomacy, all of those have to be working together. It can't just be one or the other. And so we need to be thinking about that when we are looking at solutions for different conflicts and challenges, even in the United States.
And I know even just thinking about, apart from war and like big picture things that, when I was doing my master's thesis, I was talking to this young woman who was studying computer science at, Stanford University, which is by and large the best school for computer science in the United States. And she was telling me she was an intern at this technology company. And, and she was, of course, the only woman there. And all these men were sitting around the table talking about what women wanted to have access to on a period app. So they were developing an app for women's periods. And it was men that were like, do they want to know about like breast tenderness or like, what do they want to know? Right. Like during their menstrual cycle. And I just thought that was hilarious. I could not like picture a bunch of men sitting around a table, discussing periods. And I'm like, why don't you just ask the woman in the room? She probably knows. And that's exactly, why we need women at the table, is because laws are passed that are influencing everybody. And if we aren't at the table, our interests really get left behind. And you could say that, also about race. Claire, you've worked, on women, peace, and security. I think some people here, don't work in that space. And, you mentioned the UN resolution. Can you talk to us about what that is? UN resolution 1325, and then what has been done in the past 20 years since that has been passed.
Great, yeah. So exactly for this reason that prior to 2000, women weren't included in discussions on peace, security, conflict resolution. It was always about health development, the sort of soft issues. The idea that security and defense, less on defense, but security primarily, was not a woman's domain. And the adoption of the resolution, which was advocated for by civil society as well as UN peacekeeping, strangely enough, in 1999, followed on from the other resolutions in the Security Council on children armed conflict and protection of civilians. And adopted that to talk about exactly that, how having women engaged in peace, having women's decision-making, having more women represented. And it followed initially 3 Ps: protection, prevention, and participation. And later on, relief and recovery was added. And it covers the range of how women are affected disproportionately in conflict. On the other side, though, about participation, while it has been taken up by NATO and other organizations and militaries, it was never intended for the military, because it was very much about a peace and women as peaceful actors. Since then, it's been taken on board to increase numbers of women in military and NATO as well as women in peacekeeping, but that was never the intent. And my personal view about what women bring, I'm actually going to be a little controversial here, and what I believe it's contextual, because I don't believe women always bring something peaceful to the table. I don't think one woman represents every woman. We don't do that for men, and I don't think we should do that with women. And also because and I'm referring here about defense and security, because the system is very patriarchal, because it's very structured, that a lot of women who get into defense realms or get into military environments do not speak for other women and actually counter the women's empowerment agenda. Often women can be very, as much as men, engaged in actions. 30 to 40% of women are engaged in conflict. The first time we saw a woman encouraging in Rwanda men to rape women was in the Rwandan conflict. So it is a very contextual issue. And I also don't want to put that on women's shoulders, as you mentioned before, because women aren't the moral compass of the world. We don't have to give direction and be better behaved, and tell men to be better behaved. And we don't have to be peaceful if we don't want to be. That is what is the power of being a woman and being empowered. So I think there's different, while we should all be looking for peace, I don't think always women and men, because of the patriarchal system we're all constrained by, necessarily always do that, which is unfortunate. And that's why I think we need more feminists at the table, which include men, and that men should speak about peace and women's inclusion. But we do need women, as Susan said, the idea that you would even do anything related to peaceful negotiation and conflict resolution without half the population being present, but it has to be intersectional as well.
I like that. I'm going to totally steal that. And we need more feminists at the table. And of course, anyone can be a feminist. We should all be feminist. Speaking of the word feminist, one thing that I found is, even educated women that I would ask in America, are you a feminist? Some of them would be like, Like, I don't know. But when I was in Afghanistan, where you could actually get killed for being a feminist, all the women I asked, are you a feminist? They were like, of course I am. Because I taught classes for a year that I was there. And I thought, gosh, the stakes are so much higher here. And look how brave these women are. So if women in Afghanistan can stand up and say, I'm a feminist, then by God, a man in America or a woman in, the Netherlands or wherever, we can all stand up and say we're feminist. And I loved your point about, we're not all peaceful. I had actually gone to an event on International Women's Day on March 8th this past year. And, we do hear that. And I do think that women bring, certain skills to a table and men bring certain skills. But I actually, have a lot of masculine qualities, right? And so I think to say feminine qualities belong to a woman and masculine qualities belong to a man, it's not always binary. I think that anyone who has ever worked with me would say, gosh, Jackie Faye is aggressive. And that's technically a term that we use for men, or even in Google Translate, is sexist, right? I think some words in adjectives, particularly if you translate them, oftentimes they get translated to only be a male adjective in another language, which is really, really interesting. But before we wrap up, does anybody have any questions? I'd love to, you can unmute and ask, please jump in.
Hello, my name is Tina. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Tina. Go for it.
Hi. Well, first and foremost, I'm grateful to have been a part of this session. I wanted to find out, here in the United States, I have some colleagues that are doing a lot of good work. I wanted to find out, I know this is always a typical question, how we can help.
And so there are ways to do it safely. I put my email address in the chat. So if you want to follow up directly with me via email, I'm happy to connect you with Golda. But, like Golda said, these women also need jobs. A lot of them, are done with school. They don't need the education anymore. They're very educated women, that just need jobs because there really are no jobs in Afghanistan. And one thing that I've seen while I'm here, in Europe is so many Ukrainian refugees, and I've seen the way they're treated in comparison to Afghan refugees. And it's been really, really interesting. And I wanted to bring that up, briefly, is that I think for some reason in our minds, we think that, maybe people from Ukraine can do better work than people from Afghanistan. But you have to remember the international community invested so much money in Afghanistan for 20 years. We educated these people. They are ready to work just as much as people, yes, Ukraine was a democracy, or is a democracy. But there's talented people all over the world. And I think that we also don't need to confuse people with governments, right? The people, just because the government changed, the people are still the same people that were there when we were helping them. Golda, do you want to add anything there?
Yes, I don't want to call the Taliban a government. It's just a mafia. And I think it's very important that we do not call things governments that are just a bunch of guys with guns running around. I mean, they shouldn't be getting funding or be recognized just because they have a bunch of guns. Like, why does that qualify you? Maybe we should go into LA and go into the projects and maybe the guy who's the head of the Bloods should be the mayor, and we better talk to him about getting access to the projects. And I'm not trying to say that my husband grew up around there, so it comes to a personal connection. But I just really want to say that we need to recognize all these people as stateless people, and they have individual rights.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing to recognize. And that's why the Taliban are not getting international recognition. They were not voted into power, they took power. And so, and certainly that was not what, the majority, they don't represent the majority of the people, so I think that's an important distinguishing thing. So thank you for bringing that point up. Okay, so with all of these issues, I think we covered a lot of space. Let's go around the table one more time and see, are you hopeful for the future? Let's end with that. Zeinab, do you want to take that first? Are you hopeful for the future?
So we have a saying in our culture that says human beings are alive with hope. If there is no hope, there is no life. So of course I'm hopeful, but I know that to see the change, it will take time, effort, and also dedicated people. But of course I'm hopeful, and just like the first time that the Taliban, if talking about my country, the first time that Taliban were gone, I'm hopeful to see that again.
All right, Susan, are you hopeful for the future?
Well, you got to have hope. There's a saying that if you save one life, you save the world. And a lot of what we can do is help individuals. And that's what it comes down to. The large scale ripple effects happens from an individual stone dropping in water. And something that really resonated with me, Jackie, that you mentioned, and Claire, that you mentioned as well, is the idea of feminism, that we don't need solely women or men at the table, we need feminists, right, at the table. And something many countries are doing is feminist foreign policy, which affects rights, representation, and resources. And so when I think about an individual, do they have rights? Are they represented, and are they given resources? And that's the way that we can help individuals, is making sure that they have those three areas to grow, whether they are in a basement in Afghanistan, whether they are a refugee in Europe, whether they are in the United States from a low income family, wherever these people are, the rights, representations, and resources, that's something that we can each do. And I am hopeful that we can all do it together.
All right, Golda, what about you? Are you hopeful for the future?
I am, because of the people. I think we can just connect to each other as people and look at the people here. I mean, Zeinab and Susan and Clare, I'm so grateful I've met you, and just the fact that we're coming together and trying to do some things gives me hope, and all of the people that I meet give me hope. One thing I just want to mention, I'm glad I'm not the last speaker, there's one kind of scary thought maybe, is please don't turn away when there is violence. The Taliban is escalating the violence. They are kidnapping people, they are killing people, and don't turn away from that. We need to highlight those things, because if they get away with it, because the news cycle's moved on to Ukraine, and by the way, actually, one of our Ukrainian volunteers is really helping somebody in Afghanistan. His son was just kidnapped. It just goes back and forth. These people are all connected globally. It's not one place or the other. It's both. But don't turn away. Do highlight those things. Bother someone about them. Make sure that we don't forget, and that we highlight the names, because when you highlight the names of someone who's in danger, it actually protects them. So.
All right, Claire, are you hopeful for the future?
Yeah, I am. I think that the young people who are not willing to put up with certain things, I think there's a global movement. I do agree with Golda about the idea that we go down a rabbit hole, however, and we would turn away. We're so focused on another conflict or frozen conflict, we're not looking at issues like Afghanistan. And I think while I am hopeful, I do still encourage more courage in pushing, women's rights, human rights, but especially for what's happening to women. And I do, although I'm hopeful, I am frightened, because I think there's a huge pushback, and that women who have fought for years, for decades, we sometimes become complacent that everything's in place and we don't have to do any more. And you cannot ever lift your finger off that pulse. You can't stop pushing forward. So hopeful, but with caution. And so I guess the glass is half full, and we need to make sure we keep pushing so that it is entirely full in the future.
Entirely full indeed. Okay, so we will end there, but the reason I wanted to end on that is because I want everyone to remember that it's also about taking personal responsibility about what we all can do to make sure that this world is more equal for each and every one of us. So like I said at the beginning, I am the founder of One January. We donate half of our net profits to empower women impacted by war and poverty. So everyone on this call will get a discount if you're interested there. And then also we are supporting our nonprofit partner and Zeinab as she is going to the Half Ironman World Championship, and she will be raising $15,000 for our nonprofit partner She Can Try. If you would like to help her, you can donate directly to She Can Try. All this will be in an email for you. But that money will go to, we'll probably donate some to Golda to help with, her school there, and they will be doing some sort of sports as well. And then we also have a program running in Kenya. So we're working on a lot. I'd love to have you get involved. I put my email in the chat. Reach out if you have any ideas. But if not, I hope everyone feels informed and has a very, very beautiful day or evening wherever you are. Thank you so much.